Time for my April reading wrap up. I read 15 books in the month of April and I DNF'd 3. So let's go over my thoughts, my ratings, and also update my reading journal at the end. So overall, I had a really great reading month. I have never read this many books in 1 month ever in my life. I think I've definitely gotten into the groove and figured out what works for me and what keeps me reading. I did a mixture of listening to audio and then reading either a physical book or a Kindle. So having it in multiple formats was really, really helpful in the last couple of months. And also switching genres. So this month I read quite a few different genres. I read a lot of cozy mystery, cozy fantasy, some thrillers, and then some sci-fi horror I got into. So I will split this up into the different genres and categories so you can skip through. I already posted my May TBR, so if you want to go back and see what I'm reading for May, it is there. Otherwise, I'm going to dive into it. I'm trying to keep my intros a little bit shorter. But I think I will start with my cozy mysteries because that's what I started the month out with. I flip-flopped between like a cozy mystery, then I read a cozy fantasy, then I read like a thriller or sci-fi, and so that just really kept my momentum going. So for cozy mysteries, I read the majority from one series. So I started the Perfectly Proper Paranormal Museum mystery series by Kirsten Weiss, and I read the Perfectly Proper Paranormal Museum, Pressed to Death, Deja Mu, and Chocolate a la Murder. And I listened to that on audio and then also read it on Kindle, but I read them through my library. I don't physically have them. I put Perfectly Proper Paranormal Museum on hold back in like September, and it took all this time for me to get it, but I really enjoyed it. I understand why people are liking the series. For a cozy mystery, it is very different. I thought it was a really great start to the series, and it follows our main character who got fired from this like high corporate job, and she moves back home to a small town called San Benedetto, and the second most popular attraction is this paranormal museum, and she gets offered an opportunity to buy it. So instead she just tries to, like, this whole book is she's just sort of running it for a friend as like a favor, as a way to make a little bit of income and see if it's actually viable. And there's a murder that happens. I really liked the main character. She's just trying to figure it out, and she has really great business sense. But I really enjoyed that it's in a paranormal museum. Almost every cozy mystery that I read is in like a bookshop or a bakery, and while those are really fun and I really, really enjoy that, I think that the change of pace is different, and the author is really clever. Besides the murder, that she always does this other like investigation, and in this one it was about this haunted photo, because everything in there is supposed to be haunted and have a story, so she looks up the story, and I enjoy that. And in the end she does like this mock trial to try and prove cold case and their innocence that she's found from this haunted photo. In terms of the murder, I thought there were some good twists and turns. She does have a lot of attempts on her life in every single book, and she does pretty okay with it. I think that it'd be a bit more realistic that it would just like shut someone down. But she's really good at investigating, and it wasn't too hard to figure out who it was towards the end. I was between two people, so the author did a really good job at kind of like changing my mind. I will say with this series, one of my favorite parts of it is her friendship. She has two friends, Adele and Harper, who are extremely good friends. They're always there for each other. And so I really, really liked it. And then this one was like her trying to clear her friend Adele's name. I had fun with that book. So after I read some other books, I went into Pressed to Death, which is about a haunted great press and someone getting murdered in that, and she has a new employee. She's trying to clear their name. There's a couple of other murders that happened. I don't think I'm going to like dive into the plot of each book. I just think they're just fun, and you get to see more of her mother. Her mother's like really involved in this ladies' aid, who they're somewhat a crazy like ladies group, and they're very formidable ladies, and I really enjoy that. I also really enjoy our main character's love of burritos. The amount of times this girl eats a burrito in these books, I appreciate it because I grew up in Arizona and it's just my comfort food. But I have been eating so many burritos lately just because I was reading the book and it sounded so good. That one, I liked the second one. It was not too much of a surprise, the murderer, but there was some good twists and turns in that one as well. And then going on to Deja Mu, which is probably my favorite of the books that I read. This one involved her mom a lot more. This town has a tradition where they make this gigantic straw cow around Christmas, and every year it gets lit on fire, and her mom is like really determined to keep it from being lit on fire. She fails, but she's like really fired up, and then someone gets murdered. And so she's heavily involved in the investigation in this one, and she cracks me up. She's just so like intense and bossy, but it's just a really fun situation. But I also liked to see the whole mother and daughter crime fighting duo almost. So I think that one was my favorite book of the series so far. And then I went into Chocolate a la Murder, which is kind of like a Valentine's Day themed one. The murder takes place in a chocolate shop, and the haunted object in that one is this haunted molinillo, which is used in like breaking up cacao beans. I really like how the author incorporates the haunted object into what's happening in the murder, because you get a lot of like history involved in it, and I just liked that dual investigation to it. I learned a lot from it. I knew what a molinillo was, but like a little bit of the history to that was really fun. So it's like she's solving 2 crimes in every book. It is a cozy mystery, so there's some predictability to it, but it is different than all of the other ones that I've been reading. So I think it was a really good twist on a cozy mystery series. So the only other cozy mystery that I read this month was something that I put on my April TBR. I did read it, and that is Murder at the Bee Farm by Sue Hollowell. And that one I gave a 2 stars, and that is kind of generous. I don't ever really give 2 stars, and 1 stars I reserve for ones that I just like absolutely loathe, and I've only given a 1 star once. So this one was just really poorly written, honestly, and it had such premise. The beginning part of the book, when she arrived back to the Airbnb, it was very well described in the descriptions, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be great. But then it was just so bad. The murder happens off camera, basically, and they just show up and talk about it, and it's related to her like ex, and it's just so abrupt. And like basically her boyfriend cheated on her, she moved back home. The girl that got murdered is the one that cheated with him, and he sounds like a terrible person, so you don't understand why she's so invested in clearing his name. And then like just things just hop around so much. She's working at this B&B overnight, and then like the next day she's telling you how much she's like grown as a person. If there was like more time, like even just 100 pages fleshing out all of these things would have been so much better. And then at the end, the murder is just out of left field. There's just no, like in cozy mysteries, you have to have, you know, multiple people could be responsible. There has to be little nuggets. You can't just like pull it right like out of your butt towards the end, and that's just what it felt like. So I did finish it. I finished it really quickly. It's not very big. I think it's like 200 pages, but it was just not good. And so it was just kind of infuriating a little bit. So I gave it a 2 stars and moved on. But yeah, it was just a little bit of a letdown. So don't recommend that. So the next category that I read the most of was cozy fantasy, and I read the Weary Dragon Inn series. I read the first 4 books in the series by S. Usher Evans. Drinks and Sinkholes I saw on a whim when I was just going through my Libby app, and I saw that like a lot of people had put this series on hold, and it sounded really, really entertaining. I put this on hold August or July, and so I finally got it this month, and I just kind of went down a rabbit hole because I really enjoyed it. And it follows Bev, who owns the Weary Dragon Inn in this small town called Pig's End. And this whole world has many different creatures, but there was a war about 5 years prior against Queenside and Kingside. And you hear about that in the periphery. Mostly you just hear kind of her backstory, where she showed up around that time with no memory, and she gets hired as a beverage wench by the old owner of the inn, and so they name her Bev, basically, and he dies and passes it on to her. So you see her as this innkeeper in this small town. She has two best friends who run the butcher shop across the street named Ida and Valora. And I loved that part. So the whole story is these mysterious sinkholes are showing up into town. So Bev gets kind of conscripted by the town to investigate, and I really enjoyed the investigation. I like this series because there's a lot of different creatures, but they're kind of hidden because the queen is not big on magic. And so they barely know anything about what's going on, so she has to kind of surreptitiously get around all of these soldiers that are there to investigate. She meets gnomes who are kind of like dwarves in the fact that they're mining and tunneling, and then she meets these giant like mole men. And I really like it because a lot of fantasy series always have the same types of like creatures or beings, and they're fun, but I like a little bit of a change. So I really liked how it turned out in the end and the explanation, and then you get little nuggets of Bev's past that becomes more mysterious over time. So every book that I read in this series did have a little bit more of her history, and I like that mystery. And I think book 5, which I'm getting into in May, is going to have quite a bit more. So very excited to continue it. So I, like in between my cozy mysteries and everything, I went into the next, which was Fiends and Festivals. And there is a festival which is like their biggest money earner, the Pig's End Annual Harvest Festival. So I think it would be really great to read around like autumn. There's all these little competitions between the different townspeople, and they're kind of funny, but then all these really crazy incidents keep happening, and you get to hear more about Bev's history. Like there was a lot of parts that were a lot more lighthearted and really funny to me in this one. You got to see more of the townspeople, more creatures, and it's just very entertaining. The next one is one of my favorites though, and that was Secrets and Snowflakes. It's very perfect for winter. She has a bunch of guests come to the inn and they get snowed in. So it was kind of like locked room mystery. She's asked to investigate for her friends Ida and Valora, who are across the street. Again, they're the butchers. So you get to see more of them in this series. They're being blackmailed by somebody, and so she has to try and figure it out. But because they're all like confined in one area, it's really it was really entertaining because you got to see a lot more character development between people. So I really enjoyed that. And the last one that I read was Beasts and Baking, which is book number 4, and it is perfect for spring. So I really enjoyed reading that one when I was outside doing a lot of work, so I was listening to it, and then I really read that one fast. But 4 grannies come bang at the end, and then all of a sudden all these like buildings start getting lit on fire, and they're super strong, so they're just like putting up buildings right away. And I think the mystery of what they are was very entertaining. Ultimately, I liked the town coming together to help everyone else and figure out what's going on. You got to hear a lot more about, there's a mysterious town called Lower Pig's End, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but there's a lot more involved, and I think that's going to be featured heavily in book number 5. There's always a little bit element of the queen side, and whether they're being watched in the background. So I think it's going to really ramp up as we go. But every book is cozy. There are a couple of moments where she talks about her past, which gets a little bit darker, but for the most part, I think every book is very cozy and fun and perfect for, it's very seasonal series, so perfect for the seasons. And the last book that I read in the cozy fantasy genre was Chalice by Robin McKinley. So this one actually inspired my May reading journal setup, so if you haven't seen that, I did a whole beekeeping theme. I did also a mixture of audio and reading. I liked the audio. The narrator had a very soft voice, which I think was very great for this book, but I definitely preferred reading it over the audio. So I eventually just stopped the audio and started reading it a little bit more, just because I could envision it, and just because she was so soft spoken, it was a little bit harder to get through. I kind of lost focus a little bit. This is a fantasy book, and I would say it's cozy fantasy just because of the beekeeping. All of the descriptions of it were just beautiful. I loved hearing about it. This is set in a world where each domain is led by a master and a chalice, and they are connected to the land via magic. And whenever a master dies, there's a new master that takes place in the same bloodline, and either the chalice still exists or a new one is chosen. In this story, both the master and the chalice, the previous ones, have died, and he had no heir, so they had to bring his brother, who had been sent away when he was very young, to go through these trials. I don't want to give too much away, but he's definitely not human anymore, so the domain is in a lot of trouble. The chalice, who is our main character, has been holding everything down and trying to calm the land, which has started to have some serious issues. The system itself is not insanely complicated, but there's a circle involved, and each one has different abilities that are also attached to the land. And you have to read it to really understand the system. So it is cozy fantasy, but I would say it's a little bit more cozy fantasy than a lot of cozy fantasies are. Each chalice's ability is related to a certain type of liquid. Hers is related to honey. So just her whole beekeeping and her property and how beautiful it is and how old the land is really wonderful to read about. It was beautiful writing, in my opinion. But I have seen people say that they find the book a little bit boring, and in some areas it did drag on. I think that she kind of reiterated the magic system a few too many times, or the fact that she's the chalice. We understand that she's chalice, so that was kind of a drawback to it. And the ending, while I liked it and I could kind of see it coming, there's a bit of an antagonist. They do come in quite late in the book. So while it does create some stakes, I thought it probably should have been a little bit earlier. There was just a lot of world building in the first 60% of the book. And then at the end, I wanted a little bit more of a challenge, but the way things were solved in the end was just a little bit, I wouldn't say like Mary Sue-ish, but it just was a little bit too easy, and I liked a little bit more of a challenge. I think if she had made the book a little bit longer and kind of cut out some of the descriptions of things, that it would have been a better ending, in my opinion. But otherwise, I really enjoyed this. It's kind of a hit or miss for people. You either really love it or it's not like your favorite. So the next thing I want to talk about doesn't really fit into any of the categories, and that's one of the books that I DNF'd. It is a soft DNF. So I said I was going to read When in Rome this month, and I started it and got about 25% of the way in. And I did like it. I just kind of wasn't in the mood to read it at that point. So I did put it down, had it on hold at the library. And after like 20%, I just knew that I wasn't going to read more of it this month. So I just kind of sent it back. So I do have to put it on hold again. I have so many other books that I want to read that I actually own, so I am just putting that to the side for a second. So the next full category that I read was, I'm just going to combine them together, and that's thriller and like sci-fi, kind of sci-fi horror. They're all mixed together. So I will start with the thriller that I read, which I did talk about in my April TBR, and that is The Girl on the Porch by Richard Tismar. I had that on hold for a very long time, and I finally got to it. I gave it a 3 stars. So it is a novella, so it's very short, and I thought the beginning was very strong. It follows a couple who one morning gets asked by their neighbors if somebody rang their doorbell at night. Their doorbell was broken, but they go and look at their security footage, and they could see this girl trying to get in. And she had shackles around her ankles, and she's looking back at something, obviously scared, and then she leaves. So they call the police, and that starts to go viral. It's less about that investigation. They're not really investigating, but it's more about them questioning their neighbors. Like, they previously thought they knew a lot about people around them, or that they were in a safe area, and they're questioning their neighbors, they're questioning each other in their house. I thought there were some good moments. What lost me was towards the end and who it was. It wasn't super surprising, but it was just like very abrupt, and I just think it could have been a little bit longer. It's like he did really well building it up and making some great tension, and then he was like, I kind of got to end the book, and so it just went really fast, like rapid towards the end. I just think it probably could have done with a little bit more to make it a little bit more interesting, because it was just very abrupt. But I did sort of like it, and I didn't guess specifically which person it was, so that was a good, you know, it was okay. I read it, but I just didn't think it was like the best thriller that I'd read. So the next books that I read were because they had just released, and they were by two authors that I really like. And the first one is Europa by Greg Beck. So Greg Beck is a adventure thriller, somewhat horror writer, and I would say this falls more into the sci-fi horror category, but it is about an expedition that happened to the moon of Europa, where they're going beneath the water. And there are kind of dual timelines where something's happened and then you flash back to see what happened, and then you flash forward to present day. And I liked that. I thought there were some really, really great moments, and I was very unique, and I really enjoyed it. I really do like Greg Beck's writing. It was a little bit under-researched, so some areas were a little bit hard to like get your mind around. And one of the biggest things which kind of drove me nuts at the beginning was that he got the moon of Europa wrong. It's the moon of Jupiter, and he put it for Saturn, and that is like, that should have been caught. So that's not a great way to start off, but ultimately I really like Greg Beck's writing, so I continued to read it. It's not one of his like strongest books, but I just like space horror. I think it's fun, and I thought the creature and everything was different. There's just some things that you kind of have to suspend your like the realism of it. It is a fiction book, so you kind of always have to do that in certain areas, but yeah, it would have my dad's a big science nerd, so it might have driven him a little bit nuts. So I gave it around like a 3.5 stars. I still really like his writing. I will continue it. He just needs to like make sure he doesn't get something that big wrong. For adventure thrillers or horror, some of the subgenres that I really like are ocean, space, subterranean, or like the Antarctic. So I have read quite a few subterranean ones, one of which was the Greg Beck book, which is Beneath Dark Ice, which I really like. And then also James Rowland's Subterranean, which I think is probably my favorite book. But I had heard of The Descent by Jeff Long. This one I hard DNF. This is either you love it or you hate it. In most of the reviews, there's either 5 stars or 1 star. I'm not going to rate it just because I didn't finish it. I got to just under 50%, so I did read quite a lot of it before I just had to put it down. I've been thinking about how to talk about this book for a couple of days because I don't want to give anything away. It is either you love it or you hate it. And a lot of people love this book. So I don't want to turn you off it just because of like my experience with it. I did find some areas of it quite boring, and then once they figured out what was going on, it went really quick. For me, I had to put it down just because of some of the subject matter in it is just too dark for me. I will say, you know, they find something underground and there's a race there, and it is not nice. There are themes of colonialism and slavery, and it's not what you think. There's things that are committed by our side, and then definitely things that are down below that are quite terrible. It's like equated to hell. Some things that happen to the people that are captured were just really dark for me, and I just did not want to continue the book because it definitely gets worse towards the end. But some people say it's done really well and the themes of the book are very interesting to them. So I would look up trigger warnings, maybe try to read some things without spoilers to see if you like it. People can comment below, but yeah, there's just a lot of people that love the book, think it's one of their favorite subterranean books, and then there's other people that just don't like it at all. I'm kind of in the middle. I just can't read some of the things that happened. Even if they don't go into great detail, it was just enough for me by the time I got to that book, that part of the book. The other book that I did DNF was the Reyes incident, and I got probably, I don't know, 15% of the way through the book. It was sold to me that it was ocean horror. It kind of is, not really. It's a killer mermaid book. By the time I got to the killer mermaids talking, I was just like so over it. And then I read some reviews and I was really glad that I put it down. It's not my favorite. Some people really like it, but I just did not want to continue that book, so I put that down. I had gotten it through my library, so I'm kind of glad that I didn't spend money to buy it because it just was not my cup of tea. It just lost me. It wasn't scary to me. like at all. So the last 3 books that I read, they were all by the same author. So I really like Michael McBride. I wasn't on here last year when I was reading his book, but I read a book called Extant, which is a very short novella. It was like 90 pages. It follows some archaeologists who are excavating a site where they believe they found that the army of Cambyses, who thousands of years ago disappeared into a sandstorm, 50,000 soldiers, and were never found again. So they think they have found the location. And when they get in there, things go a little bit crazy. I just didn't connect with any character. The main character you're supposed to care about, I just didn't really. Just because it was so short, I think it was just really hard. But I have read some novellas where I do care about the characters and I've liked them quite a bit more than I did with this one. I just think it was too short, and once the action got started, it was kind of crazy. But I think the creature, it wasn't very unique in my opinion. And I do think that Extant was a precursor to the next book that I read, which was Subterrestrial. And the thing with Michael McBride is he is an adventure thriller writer. There is some horror elements to his books. I absolutely adored Unit 51 last year. I read Subhuman and Mutation, and it's seriously like some favorites of mine. But Michael McBride is very good at researching things and science, and he's very diligent about writing and explaining it. But in Subterrestrial, I think it was published before then, and it was almost an author's earlier writing. He hadn't quite learned how to develop characters as much, and also there was way too much science. Like, I am a science nerd, way too much. It got so repetitive and boring, and I didn't care about any of the characters. And you know, in Unit 51, had I not read those stories first and known what his writing is capable of, I also read Chimera by him, and I really liked those. And he has strong female characters in there that I feel like are well developed. I care about them. They're not like helpless. In this book, the girls, they infuriated me. And I just didn't care. I just did not care about any of the characters, and there was a lot of scenes where they're in one cave running from something else, and in one cave running from something else, and they're all separated until around 80% of the way through the book, where they get together and like finally start figuring things out. I didn't like the creatures, and there was 2 different types, and I didn't like the creatures. I can't say why very much without giving anything away, so spoiler, you could pause it or skip. But there are 2 different types, and it felt like 2 different books put together, and they're just very kind of overdone in the genre, so it was just frustrating to me, and I just really didn't enjoy the book. I probably will say 3 or under. So I kind of get sad because I see people in their reviews saying that they just don't want to read more of his books. But I think if you read like Unit 51 and Chimera, you would like it better. And the last book that I read was Spores by Michael McBride. It was a lot more condensed, and he just does a lot better explaining his science. There's enough of a balance between science and character development, but it is again a subterranean thing where there was a deep injection well that was collapsed years ago, and they believe it's responsible for some crazy things that are happening. And there's certain elements of The Last of Us, so there was a good imagery. It's called Spores, so you know, you can kind of extrapolate what it's about. It was fun. There was, you know, a lot of like, there's earthquake element to it, being underground, the claustrophobia. Our main character, she's an expert in her field when it comes to earthquakes and man-made earthquakes, but she has this background with claustrophobia and being under there and working through it, and it was just really well done. There were some really crazy, like kind of spookier moments that I had a lot of fun with, and you wouldn't think the animal that's there would be scary, but it is. And there's just an atom element of basically like this primordial soup of chemicals that they'd pumped into the ground that just adds an element of danger. I liked that book. I gave it around 4 stars, and I assume that it is a precursor to the Unit 51 group that's been formed. So I liked that it was almost like a prequel to it. And yeah, I had fun with that one. I thought it was a good book. And it helped me out after I had read Subterrestrial because I was kind of disappointed. So those are all the books that I read. I think that this video is pretty long since I've been talking a long time. I'm losing my voice. Hopefully it's not too long. Ultimately, I didn't have any 5-star books this month, so it kind of struggled to figure out which book was my favorite. I settled on Chalice because it the imagery and the writing stuck with me the most. I think when it comes to my favorite book of the year, or even like my top 10, it's probably not going to make it, but it still was a fun book. So those are the books I read. I think I'm going to do a really quick update to my reading journal. I'm trying to make it a little bit short since I think I've been talking a lot. So we're gonna go do that, come back. All right, so those are the books I've read in my reading journal. It was quite a lot. I'm very proud of myself for reading so many books with so much going on. I think I found my groove and kind of the system that works for me, so hopefully I can continue on and not get into a book slump in May. But let me know what you've read, if you've read any of these books, your thoughts on them. I know some of them are a little bit kind of polarizing. People either love or they don't. I would love to hear or any suggestions that you have. If you're still here, thank you again for sticking around. I always appreciate it. I have quite a few videos that I'm planning or I've already filmed coming, so look out for that. Otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful weekend and I will see you next time. Bye.